Suburban neighborhoods are supposed to feel safe. Perfect lawns, friendly neighbors, and quiet streets give us this false sense of security. But sometimes, the scariest things happen where we least expect them. The following are 3 disturbing, true suburban horror stories that prove even the safest neighborhoods can hide something terrifying. These stories are not for the faint of heart. So turn off the lights, put on your headphones, and let's begin. This happened back in 2019, during the middle of summer when I was living with my parents in a small suburban neighborhood in Illinois. The kind of place where people leave their doors unlocked, kids ride their bikes until dark, and everyone waves when you drive by. The kind of place where nothing bad ever happens, or at least that's what I thought. I was 21 at the time, home from college for the summer, and honestly bored out of my mind. My parents had gone out of town for a family reunion I didn't want to attend, so I had the house to myself for the entire weekend. At first, I was excited about the quiet, but by Saturday night, the silence was starting to feel oppressive. I remember sitting in the living room around 11:30 p.m., scrolling through Netflix, trying to find something to watch. The only light in the room came from the TV and a small lamp on the side table. It was one of those muggy summer nights where the air feels heavy, even inside. The AC was on, but it didn't seem to help. At some point, I realized how quiet everything was. No cars passing, no dogs barking, no distant hum of a neighbor's TV, just silence. For a second, I thought it was nice, peaceful, but then I noticed something out of the corner of my eye. The big bay window in the living room faced the front yard. I had left the blinds open because, well, why wouldn't I? It's a safe neighborhood, and besides, it's not like anyone's walking around at midnight. But when I looked at that window, I froze. There was a man standing there. Not a silhouette, not a trick of the light, an actual man. He was just outside the glass, facing me. I can still picture it perfectly. He wasn't pressed up against the window or anything dramatic like that. He was just standing there. His posture was casual, hands in his pockets like he was waiting for a bus or something. What made it worse was that he didn't move when I saw him. No jump, no flinch. Just this slow, almost deliberate tilt of the head like he was studying me. My first instinct was to tell myself I was imagining it. That maybe the glare from the TV created some weird reflection. So I blinked a few times and leaned forward. Nope, he was still there. I couldn't make out his face because the porch light wasn't on, but his outline was clear enough to know this wasn't some neighbor out for a late-night stroll. My heart started pounding so hard it felt like the whole room could hear it. I didn't know what to do. Should I yell? Call 911? Turn off the lights? My phone was on the couch next to me, so I grabbed it and dialed 911 without taking my eyes off the window. As soon as I started talking to the dispatcher, the man slowly stepped backward into the darkness. He didn't run or act startled, he just walked away like it was no big deal. By the time the cops showed up, he was long gone. They did a quick sweep of the yard and the street, but didn't find anyone. No footprints, no sign that he'd even been there. They suggested maybe it was a prank or that I'd misinterpreted a shadow, but I know what I saw. The officers left after about 20 minutes, and I tried to convince myself everything was fine. I locked every door and window and even put a chair under the front doorknob like some kind of old-school security system. Then I sat back down, pretending to watch TV while every creak and groan of the house made my skin crawl. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I walked outside to get some air. That's when I saw something that made my stomach drop. On the concrete near the bay window, in the condensation from the AC unit, were 2 perfect shoe prints pointed toward the glass. Someone had been there. The cops brushed me off when I called again, saying it was probably a teenager messing around. But here's the part that still haunts me. For the rest of the summer, every couple of nights, I'd catch the faintest sound of footsteps outside my window after dark. Sometimes I'd hear the gravel crunch, sometimes just a soft shift in the bush. I never saw him again, but I know he was there. Even now, 5 years later, I still can't sit in that living room at night without shutting every blind and double-checking the locks. And I'll never forget that feeling knowing that someone was just standing there, silently watching me in the place I felt safest. This happened about 3 years ago when I was living with my fiancée, Emily, in a quiet suburban neighborhood in Virginia. We had just bought our first house, a cozy two-story with a finished basement. It wasn't anything fancy, but it felt like a dream to us. After years of renting apartments, having our own space felt incredible. The neighborhood was calm, full of families who waved as you drove by and kept their lawns perfectly trimmed. The kind of place where you feel safe enough to leave the front door unlocked for a few minutes while taking groceries inside. That sense of safety was comforting, until it wasn't. It started on a Wednesday night in late October. Emily had gone to bed early because she had a big presentation at work the next morning. I stayed up in the living room, scrolling on my phone, half watching some late-night TV. Around 1 a.m., I decided to call it a night. I turned everything off, made sure the doors were locked, and headed upstairs. As I walked past the basement door, I noticed something odd. It was slightly open. Now that was strange because we almost never went down there. The basement was mostly storage, a few boxes, old furniture, and some random junk we hadn't unpacked since moving in. We had a habit of keeping the basement door shut, mostly because it creeped Emily out. I figured I'd just forgotten to close it earlier. But when I reached for the door to shut it, I froze. From the darkness below, I heard a sound. It wasn't loud, just this faint, slow creaking noise. Like a floorboard shifting under someone's weight. For a second, I told myself it was the house settling. But then it happened again, another creak, followed by what sounded like the softest, almost imperceptible whisper of fabric brushing against something. I stood there, gripping the doorknob, my heart pounding so hard it hurt. Every instinct was telling me something was wrong. I quietly shut the door and locked it. Then I tiptoed upstairs and grabbed a baseball bat from the closet in our bedroom. Emily was still asleep, completely unaware of what was happening. I didn't want to wake her, not yet. I went back to the basement door, slowly unlocked it, and pulled it open. The stairs stretched down into pure darkness. Our basement light was at the bottom of the stairs, which was a design flaw I had cursed many times before. I took a deep breath, gripped the bat tighter, and started down the steps. Each creak of the wood made me feel exposed, like whatever was down there knew I was coming. When I reached the bottom, I fumbled for the light switch and flicked it on. The basement flooded with light, and for a moment I felt stupid. Everything looked normal, the boxes, the furniture, the clutter. Nothing seemed out of place. I did a quick sweep of the room, even checked behind the old couch and inside a couple of boxes, but there was nothing. No sign of anyone. I told myself I'd imagined the sounds, maybe I was just tired. So I went back upstairs, locked the basement door again, and finally crawled into bed next to Emily. But I couldn't sleep. About an hour later, I heard it again. This time, it was unmistakable 3 slow, deliberate knocks coming from the basement door. I sat up in bed, frozen. My first thought was that I was dreaming. But then the knocks came again, louder this time. Emily woke up and asked what that was. I told her to stay in the room and call 911 while I grabbed the bat again and crept toward the door. Before I could reach it, I heard something that made my blood run cold. A voice. It was low and gravelly, almost like a whisper, but I could make out the words. "Open the door." I swear to God, that's what it said. I shouted that the cops were on their way and whoever was down there needed to leave. Silence followed. A few minutes later, police arrived. They searched the basement thoroughly. Nothing. No signs of forced entry, no broken windows, nothing out of place. The officers told us it was probably some kind of prank or maybe even an animal that had gotten in somehow. But here's the part that still keeps me up at night. The next morning, when I went downstairs to check for myself, I noticed something I hadn't seen before. Near the back wall of the basement, hidden behind some boxes, was a small crawlspace door I didn't even know existed. It was slightly open. Inside were footprints in the dust-bare footprints leading deeper into the darkness. We packed up and stayed at Emily's parents' house for 2 weeks after that. When we finally came back, I had that crawlspace sealed shut. To this day, I wonder how long someone had been down there. And what would have happened if I had opened that door when they asked? This happened about 2 years ago, during the summer after I graduated college. I was living back at my parents' place, a quiet suburban neighborhood in New Jersey where nothing ever happens. The kind of street where every house looks almost the same, two-story homes with neatly cut lawns, white fences, and kids' bikes scattered across driveways. It was a Saturday night, and I'd just gotten home from hanging out with some friends. It was around 1 a.m., and the whole neighborhood was dead silent. Most of the houses were completely dark except for a few porch lights. My parents had gone out of town for the weekend, so the house was all mine. I parked in the driveway, walked inside, and immediately kicked off my shoes. Everything felt normal. I grabbed a water bottle from the fridge, went upstairs, and started scrolling on my phone in bed. After a while, I decided to take a shower before going to sleep. That's when things started getting weird. While I was in the bathroom, I thought I heard something from downstairs. It was faint, just a soft thump like something falling over. I paused for a second, listening, but when I didn't hear it again, I shrugged it off. Houses make noises at night, right? I finished my shower, got dressed, and walked back into my bedroom. That's when I noticed something that made my stomach tighten. The bedroom door. I had left it halfway open when I went to shower. Now it was completely shut. I stood there for a good 5 seconds, just staring at it, trying to convince myself that maybe I closed it without thinking. But then I remembered, I never closed that door, ever. I slowly walked over and opened it. The hallway was dark and empty. Nothing seemed out of place. I told myself I was being paranoid and decided to head downstairs for a snack to calm my nerves. As I walked down the stairs, I noticed the front door was unlocked. That was strange because I always lock it the second I come inside. Again, I tried to brush it off, thinking maybe I just forgot. But then I saw something on the kitchen counter that made my blood run cold. My keys. I swear I had left them on the little table by the front door when I came in. Now they were sitting neatly in the middle of the kitchen, counter-lined up perfectly, like someone had placed them there intentionally. That's when the reality hit me. Someone else was in the house. I didn't even think. I bolted back upstairs, locked myself in my bedroom, and called 911. The dispatcher told me to stay on the line and remain quiet until officers arrived. I sat there in the dark, holding my breath, listening for any sound. For a few minutes, it was dead silent. Then, from somewhere in the house, I heard it. Footsteps. Slow, heavy footsteps moving across the floor downstairs. I whispered to the dispatcher what I was hearing, and she told me the officers were only a few minutes away. But then the footsteps started coming up the stairs. I can't even explain the kind of fear that hit me in that moment. My whole body was shaking, and every instinct was screaming to run, but there was nowhere to go. I just gripped the phone and stared at the doorknob, waiting for it to turn. The footsteps stopped right outside my bedroom door. And then, nothing. The silence was worse than the footsteps. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I just waited. Finally, I heard the faint sound of sirens in the distance. That must have scared whoever it was because suddenly the footsteps retreated fast. Down the stairs, across the floor, and then the front door slammed shut. A minute later, the police arrived. They searched the entire house and found no one. But here's the part that still keeps me up at night. One of the officers asked me to double-check the address when I gave my statement. When I looked at my driver's license and then back at the house number, my stomach dropped. This wasn't my parents' house. I had parked in the wrong driveway, walked into the wrong house, and didn't even realize it because it looked almost identical to ours. The homeowners weren't home that night, but someone else was. And whoever they were, they didn't call the cops when they heard me come in. They just waited. I moved out of my parents' neighborhood the following year. And now, no matter where I live, I always triple-check the address because I never want to feel that kind of terror again. That's going to do it for tonight's video. If you enjoyed these stories, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more true horror stories every week. And if you've ever experienced something terrifying in your own neighborhood, I'd love to hear about it in the comments below. Thanks for watching. Stay safe out there. And remember, sometimes the biggest threats aren't out in the wild, they're right outside your window.